Mother's Day had always been quiet in our household, a small celebration with breakfast in bed and a phone call or two from distant relatives. This year, I had tried to keep my expectations low, knowing Kara's tendencies for theatrics. When she and Eric arrived, I noticed immediately the air of ceremony she had brought with her, the way she carried herself, as if the entire day revolved around her own sense of style and timing. Kara handed me a small envelope with a flourish. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," she said, her voice bright and casual. I opened it carefully and found a single lottery ticket, the kind sold at the corner store for $2. I smiled politely, tucking it between my fingers, and said, "Thank you, Kara. That's thoughtful of you." Then she turned toward her mother-in-law, Susan Wright, who had accompanied them. Kara produced a large silk-wrapped box with a thick golden ribbon that gleamed under the morning sunlight, streaming through my kitchen window. "And for you, Susan," she said, presenting it as if it were a crown jewel. The box, I later learned, contained tickets for a 2-week Mediterranean cruise worth $13,000. I could feel the tension immediately. The contrast between the extravagant gift for Susan and my modest lottery ticket settled over the room like an invisible weight. Family members shifted in their seats, glancing between us, picking up on the subtle imbalance. I forced a smile and nodded at Susan, accepting the polite congratulations she offered, while trying not to let my chest tighten from the sting of humiliation. I tucked the lottery ticket into my wallet and focused on the small breakfast I had prepared, making tea and setting plates, keeping my hands busy to mask the flush rising in my face. Kara's expression was bright and unbothered, as if she were unaware of the quiet tension she had created. I poured a cup of tea and sat down, lifting it in a silent toast to the day, and tried to steady myself for what was coming next, knowing that the real test of patience had only just begun. Kara leaned back in her chair, smirking as she picked up her coffee. "You know," she said, twirling the lottery ticket between her fingers, "if that little ticket wins half of it, better be mine. Fair is fair, right?" Her tone was light teasing, but there was a sharp edge beneath the words that made the air in the kitchen feel suddenly heavier. I forced a calm smile, nodding politely. "Of course, Kara. That seems reasonable," I said, my voice steady while my stomach tightened. Inside, my blood boiled. How could she so casually turn what was meant as a small gesture of appreciation into an opportunity to stake a claim? She laughed lightly, unaware, or perhaps indifferent, to the tension that flickered across the rest of the table. Eric exchanged a quick glance with her, amused by her confidence. Susan, entirely absorbed by her own gift, glanced over at me with polite interest, clearly oblivious to the unspoken currents flowing between daughter and mother. I sipped my tea and felt the weight of the ticket pressing against my wallet, small and flimsy, yet suddenly significant. My mind raced, imagining the possibilities, both good and bad, that a simple $2 slip of paper could hold. A trivial token, yet it carried the potential to change everything if luck happened to favor it. I set my cup down carefully, measuring my thoughts before responding further. Kara leaned back, her eyes sparkling with amusement, as if nothing could touch her certainty that she would benefit. The day had begun with a small shock, but I sensed the undercurrent of something larger, something that would soon demand my attention, patience, and judgment. I drew a slow breath and folded my hands over the ticket, trying to calm the unease that had settled in my chest, knowing that the morning's gentle facade had only just begun to crack. As I sat at the table, the small lottery ticket still clutched between my fingers, memories of decades past began to surface, vivid and unyielding. I remembered the nights I stayed at the kitchen counter, grading papers while Kara slept soundly in the next room, the long hours spent preparing her school projects, sewing costumes for dance recitals, and attending every parent-teacher conference I could squeeze into my schedule. I thought of the weekends spent driving her from one activity to another, the endless practices and tournaments, and the careful budgeting that allowed her to have what she needed without ever missing a meal or a school supply. I remembered the sacrifices in a more tangible sense, the second-hand cars I bought to save money, the late-night shifts at the tutoring center, the careful meal planning that stretched every dollar. I had skipped vacations, repaired my own clothes instead of replacing them, and turned down social invitations to keep our household running smoothly. All of it had been worth it, I had told myself, because I loved her and wanted her to have every opportunity I could provide. And yet here I was, holding a $2 lottery ticket as a Mother's Day gift, while Kara handed a $13,000 cruise to her mother-in-law, a grand gesture of generosity for someone else. The contrast struck me sharply, not for the sake of material comparison, but for the sense of imbalance it revealed. All those years of careful planning and effort, all the small sacrifices that had built a life of stability for my family, seemed invisible in this moment. My love had been constant, unwavering, yet it felt taken for granted, brushed aside with a joke and a teasing demand. Still, I reminded myself that my integrity had never depended on acknowledgement. I had given freely, not for recognition or reward, but because it was right and necessary. That principle had guided every choice, every late night, every penny spent. I placed the lottery ticket carefully on the table, smoothing it out and letting it rest beside my tea. The day had begun with a simple act that now carried a weight I had not anticipated, and I knew that how I chose to respond in the moments to come would reveal the true measure of both my patience and my resolve. As Kara continued her teasing and laughter, I took a slow breath and braced myself for the moment when the morning would shift from subtle humiliation to confrontation. Later that afternoon, after the family had left, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop to review the bank statements, a routine I had maintained for decades. My eyes fell on a transaction that made my chest tighten: $13,000 withdrawn from my account at Premium Travel Services. My hand trembled slightly as I reread the description, confirming what I already suspected. Kara had charged the cruise for her mother-in-law to my account, without asking. I picked up the phone, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Kara, we need to talk about this charge on my account," I said. Trying to keep the calm I knew she would test. "Oh, that," she replied lightly, almost brushing it off. "I used some family funds. It's for a gift for your Mother's Day breakfast. Susan deserves something special. Don't worry about it." My grip on the phone tightened. "You didn't ask me. That money belongs to me, Kara. You can't just take it for your own purposes." She laughed softly, a sound that cut sharper than any raised voice. "Mom, relax. It's family money. I thought it would be fine. And honestly, it's for a good reason. Eric's been great to us all, hasn't he? He deserves it." I felt a surge of anger and disbelief, my mind racing through all the times I had worked late, saved carefully, and managed every dollar to ensure Kara had what she needed. And now, without a word, she had taken more than I would have ever freely given for a simple gesture. I pinched the bridge of my nose, forcing myself to breathe evenly. The calm I tried to project outwardly hid the storm within me. I knew that a simple conversation would not be enough. This was bigger than money. It was a question of trust and respect. I set the phone down and stared at the lottery ticket lying on the table, realizing that patience alone would not carry me through what was coming next. I sat alone in the quiet of my kitchen, the laptop still open, the statements glaring back at me. The house felt emptier than usual, though it had always been a modest, peaceful home. The laughter and chatter from earlier still echoed faintly in my mind, a reminder of how quickly a gathering could turn into a lesson in betrayal. Kara's casual disregard for boundaries, her effortless sense of entitlement, left a sting far deeper than any financial loss. I thought back over the years, the late nights grading papers, the countless drives to practices and rehearsals, the weekends spent sewing costumes or attending events that mattered more to her than to me. I had never expected recognition or reward. I had given freely quietly because it was necessary, because it was right. But now, in a single moment, all that devotion seemed diminished in her eyes, invisible against the flash of a silk-wrapped gift and a teasing smile. The weight of it pressed against me a mixture of anger, disappointment, and disbelief. My hand absently touched the lottery ticket lying beside my coffee cup. A trivial piece of paper purchased for $2 suddenly seemed almost ironic in its insignificance. Yet I sensed that even small things could carry unforeseen consequences, and that this day, with its subtle humiliation, was only the beginning of a larger reckoning. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a long, steady breath, feeling the tension coiled in my chest. The morning had set a quiet challenge before me, testing patience, resilience, and judgment. I knew I could not let this moment define the entirety of my response, but neither could I ignore it. Something significant was about to unfold, a shift in fortune or circumstance that would demand clarity, decisiveness, and perhaps a measure of cunning I had not yet needed to summon. I picked up the lottery ticket again, studying it in the dim afternoon light, sensing that the day's true turning point was still to come. Later that evening, after clearing the dishes and settling the house into its usual quiet, I returned to the lottery ticket that had been resting on the kitchen counter. Its flimsy edges, previously unremarkable, now seemed loaded with an almost palpable tension. I hesitated, my fingers brushing against the printed numbers, feeling the weight of the morning's humiliation still lingering beneath the surface. I turned on the news and waited for the drawing, my mind cycling through scenarios I had never imagined. What could a $2 ticket given with a smirk and a half-joking claim of ownership possibly mean? I watched as the numbers were announced: 7, 14, 23, 42. Powerball 18. My hand froze, eyes narrowing as I compared each figure to the numbers printed on my ticket. 7, 14, 23, 42. Powerball 18. The realization hit slowly, then all at once I had won. $120 million. A small, trivial gesture had been transformed into something unimaginable. The absurdity of the moment stole my breath, a mixture of disbelief, irony, and a faint flicker of vindication. The ticket that had felt inconsequential in Kara's hand and humiliating in mine now held a power I could scarcely comprehend. I sank into the chair, gripping the ticket as if it were both fragile and priceless. Thoughts raced. How could I respond to Kara's earlier claim, her casual expectation that half would be hers? For decades, I had lived by principle, giving freely without expectation of reward. Now principle and circumstance collided, offering an opportunity to assert boundaries and reclaim authority in a way I had never been able to before. Even as a thrill of possibility surged, I reminded myself to remain calm, deliberate. Every choice in the coming days would carry consequences, not just financially, but for family dynamics, for the measure of respect Kara had shown or failed to show over the years. The ticket sat between us in the space of memory and future reckoning, a symbol of power earned through patience and, in an ironic twist, through the casual carelessness of the very person who had humiliated me. I leaned back and let the numbers sink in, planning, silently weighing each option, understanding that this tiny gift had changed the trajectory of the day and perhaps my life forever. The next steps would demand careful thought, for Kara's entitlement could not simply go unanswered. The following morning, my phone rang incessantly. I hesitated before answering, knowing exactly whose voice would greet me. "Dad, I need to talk about the lottery," Kara said immediately, her tone sharp and insistent. We agreed that if it won, we'd split it. I expect my half. I drew in a slow breath, steadying the tightness in my chest. Kara, we never agreed on anything like that. The ticket was a gift you gave me. Legally, it belongs to me, I said, keeping my voice calm, precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. There was a pause on the line, and I could hear her frustration simmering beneath her words. You can't just, this isn't fair. You know it was meant as a shared thing. Everyone heard me at breakfast. You promised. I sat back in my chair, fingers resting on the counter. A gift, Kara, is something you give freely, without condition. I never consented to share ownership, and nothing you said changes that. You are mistaken if you think entitlement overrules principle. Her voice rose with indignation. You're acting selfish. Everyone will think you're cruel, Dad. You've done this before, always holding back what should be shared. This is supposed to be a family matter. I allowed myself a quiet pause, letting the gravity of my words settle. I have spent my life acting with integrity. That ticket was given to me. I will not compromise my ownership because of public perception or your demands. If you want to continue this discussion, it must be with respect and understanding, not anger or threats. Kara's silence stretched over the line, filled with tension. Even in her frustration, I could sense the reality sinking in. The gift was legally mine, morally mine, and I would not be swayed by theatrics or expectation. I hung up and set the phone aside, feeling the weight of the confrontation lift slightly. The choice before me was clear. Maintain firm boundaries, uphold my integrity, and let the consequences of her reaction unfold. The day was far from over, and the challenge of balancing family fairness and fortune was only beginning to take shape. By the afternoon, I had made my decision. I called the bank and instructed them to revoke Kara's access to my accounts immediately. The teller verified my identity, and within minutes, the changes were in place. The relief that followed was tangible, like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had spent decades managing every dollar, every transaction, and now I could finally secure my own financial autonomy without interference. I began making plans to relocate. Dayton was far enough from Columbus to provide a sense of separation, yet close enough to remain connected to the community I had built over the years. I started researching neighborhoods, schools for grandchildren visits, if they were ever permitted, and the local amenities that would allow me to live comfortably while maintaining the quiet life I craved. As I packed a few essential items, I allowed myself to reflect on the events of the past 24 hours. Kara's audacity had tested me, but the situation had also crystallized a truth I had long known. Boundaries were essential, and my own well-being could no longer be compromised by the expectations or entitlement of others. I contacted a few movers and arranged for a small truck to transport my most valuable possessions. Every decision felt deliberate, measured a reclaiming of control that extended beyond finances. I reviewed my plans for the lottery winnings, considering ways to invest in security, comfort, and projects that brought meaning without dependence on those who had undermined me. Sitting quietly in the empty kitchen, I allowed a deep breath to steady me. The chaos of family expectations and manipulation was behind me now, and the next chapter of my life would be guided by my own choices, my own rules, and the knowledge that I had finally reclaimed what was always mine. Once settled in Dayton, I began shaping a life that reflected my choices, my values, and the independence I had long postponed. The new house was modest but secure, a space that felt entirely my own. I arranged the furniture to suit my routines, hung photographs from past years, and unpacked the small personal touches that reminded me who I was beyond the constraints of family expectation. I turned my attention to projects that brought purpose and satisfaction. Restoring classic cars had always been a quiet passion, and now I had the time and resources to pursue it fully. Each engine rebuilt, each body polished, reminded me of the satisfaction of work done well with patience and skill. The workshop became my sanctuary, a place where the only judgments came from the precision of my hands and the quality of the results. Alongside that, I established a small foundation to support local families in need. The process of providing scholarships, organizing community events, and mentoring young parents brought a different kind of fulfillment, a sense that my resources could create opportunity and security for others without being exploited. It was a way to transform the lessons learned from betrayal into something constructive and lasting. Daily routines grounded me: morning coffee on the porch, walks through quiet streets, exchanges with neighbors who respected privacy and effort. The feeling of agency long deferred was intoxicating in its simplicity. No one dictated my choices. No one interfered with my finances. And for the first time in years, I felt fully responsible for the shape of my own life. As I closed the workshop for the evening, looking over the cars lined up like silent achievements, I understood that this was more than recovery. It was a deliberate building of the life I deserved, one founded on independence, integrity, and quiet pride, preparing me for the final stage of reflection and legacy. Sitting at my desk in the quiet of the Dayton house, I placed the lottery ticket into a small frame, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the lessons it carried. It had been a trivial $2 slip of paper when Kara handed it to me. Yet, it had revealed truths about generosity, entitlement, and the boundaries I had allowed to be crossed for far too long. I thought about the years I had devoted to my daughter, the countless sacrifices I had made, and the quiet patience that had guided me through trials large and small. I realized that integrity had always been my compass, that respect for myself and for others could not be compromised even in moments of humiliation. Each challenge I had faced, including Kara's audacity and the morning's confrontation, had tested these principles and confirmed their value. The foundation, the restored cars, the neighborhood connections, all of it reflected choices grounded in autonomy, purpose, and self-respect. Wealth had provided freedom and opportunity, yes, but it had not changed the core values that defined me. It had only highlighted the importance of asserting them. I glanced at the framed ticket, a silent witness to the shift in my life from frustration and betrayal to control and empowerment. It symbolized the turning point where patience and principle aligned with unexpected fortune, where lessons learned through experience translated into actions that reinforced dignity and independence. As I closed the drawer and stood, I understood that the story was not about the money or the small indignities endured. It was about reclaiming agency, setting boundaries, and building a life that reflected who I truly was. The journey had taught me that legacy is not measured by wealth alone, but by the integrity, courage, and choices one leaves behind.